Hey everyone, thanks for joining. So my name is Chris Parlett. I am a senior solutions architect here at TriggerMesh, and welcome to our monthly Tech Talk series. Today we'll be talking about transforming data on the fly for API modernization. So we're going to show you how TriggerMesh works and how you can use TriggerMesh to transform your data from different sources and pass it on to different targets. And we'll be talking through what that looks like in the TriggerMesh world. A little bit about myself. So again, I'm a senior solutions architect here at TriggerMesh. I live just north of Washington, D.C., so Eastern U.S., mid-Atlantic. It's nice and a little warmer today than it has been. So here you can see my email address. You can follow me on Twitter. I post things about TriggerMesh, also things about diabetes and whatever else I find funny on Twitter. TriggerMesh on my Instagram, you can follow me. And I post dumb lifting videos or what food I'm eating or board games that I play or Rubik's Cube. So you might see some of that on there. And then there's my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect and maybe we can chat about TriggerMesh or just about what you're doing, and love to talk technology and cloud and all that kind of nerdy stuff. Also down there at the bottom, you can see some websites there. So triggermesh.com. There's a ton of information there, obviously. Then we also have our public GitHub repo, since TriggerMesh is open source. So you can get the entire TriggerMesh product open source. You can see all the code there. You can see how you can contribute back, open issues, things like that. So feel free to go there. You can start to follow along. And we have all that information there on GitHub. Up in the upper right there, you see me and my wife on our anniversary last year. And then our two dogs, which I like to show, so you have a face to go with the barks that might happen in the background if you hear a package get delivered while we're talking today. You might hear that barking, and I'll tell you whether that's Lulu or Wednesday. Those are my two dogs. Lulu was the black one, Wednesday it's the tan one. So feel free to follow along with their escapades as well. I post a lot of Instagram on my dogs too, so we got that as well. Cool. So TriggerMesh, if you're not familiar with TriggerMesh, what we're trying to do here is bringing order to chaos. That's kind of the broader term picture here. So really it's about creating event-driven architectures. It's trying to pull data from a bunch of sources, taking them to other sources, and really kind of transforming them in the middle, maybe splitting, routing, things like that. So where is the data coming from? It could be coming from, just event streaming off of like Kafka or SQS or IBM MQ. Maybe if you have these kind of message queues that we can read from and do things with. Could also come from legacy applications. So old servers, old mainframes. We have customers doing that, old DB2 instances. It could also come from your on-prem servers. It could come from also like maybe your cloud services, SaaS applications, Salesforce, Slack, all this kind of stuff. So we have all these kind of connectors. A lot of people use us for multi-cloud. So, hey, we need to go from AWS, because we use that for some of our things, to Google Cloud Run, right? So we could do that kind of translation for you. And then other times when you're translating that data, like if you're going to Salesforce, you actually need to transfer the data around, shift it around a little bit inside. TriggerMesh can do that. By the way, that's a little lead into our next monthly talk, is going to be about Salesforce transformation. So if you're curious about that, we can definitely talk more about that next monthly tech talk. Some of the advantages, so we're built on top of Kubernetes, built on top of Knative. We use Knative and we extend it in order to kind of do what you need to do. So Knative, if you're not familiar, is a serverless architecture on top of Kubernetes. So what does that get you? What benefits does that get you? One, you can run anywhere, right? So anywhere you can run Kubernetes. I run my cluster in EKS in Amazon. I also have a cluster that I can run locally on my laptop. You can run it basically anywhere you can run Kubernetes, right? It's that mobile, right? So that's one of the benefits of Kubernetes, and TriggerMesh goes along with that because we're on top of Kubernetes. We are, architecture agnostic, so you can plug into any different cloud provider. It's a modern architecture. So using modern technology, even though we interface with legacy technology, we're a modern technology stack, right? Which is useful for, as you're trying to modernize your infrastructure. And it's really self-service, right? So providing these declarative APIs in a self-service way, users can have their own namespaces to do their own things without anyone touching it. Or you can provide these APIs and these transformations and these data pipelines to your developers, so they don't have to think about it. They just say, hey, here's an API, I send my data there, and away it goes. And it's very extensible, right? So since it's open source, since it's plugged on top of other technologies that we use, very extensible. So we can plug into existing things. You can just use webhooks and event streams. You can use SQS, it's all these different technologies. And I know I just name dropped a bunch, but we can really interface with a lot of these, and you can bring your own, you can connect to your own things. You can kind of modify to suit your needs. So it really is that flexible, which is really important for making sure that, we can do these kind of data pipeline and data flows for you. So here's the architecture. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I just want to kind of show you what this looks like under the hood. So you can see on the right side there, the baseline here is Kubernetes. So we're running on top of Kubernetes, we're running on top of Knative, and we're extending that further, right? So there's a couple different pieces. Again, generally speaking, it is the event sources. It's the stuff in the middle, the transformations, routing, splitting, storing events, things like that. We're doing a lot of stuff in the middle there. And then where do we want to send it? So that's kind of the high level pieces of it, but there are kind of components in each of those that do different pieces. There's CLIs, there's APIs on top of that, authentication, all the kind of stuff. So we handle all that for you, but just know that it looks like a giant stack. It looks like a complicated thing. We're really helping you we're taking care of all of that underlying plumbing for you so that you can just kind of focus on your business logic, right? So this is the kinds of things that we're going to build out here. So this is a little more high level of a diagram, but this is something that we worked with someone else to kind of show what the power is. What they needed was interfacing with legacy mainframe, IBM mainframes running COBOL code, and they wanted to translate that into JSON in SQS so that their developers knew what to do with it, right? It's hard to work with copybook off of IBM MQ. It's easy to work with JSON off of SQS. So what TriggerMesh was doing is making that pipeline, right? So we have IBM MQ, we're pulling that in, creating a cloud event from it. So a cloud event is a specification from the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computer Foundation. So we're actually creating a cloud event from IBM MQ. We're sending it on to the transformation engine, which uses a copybook. Now, if you're not familiar with copybook, it's older than I am. It's COBOL language. Basically, what it is, it's a specification for what the data is representing, right? What the data looks like. So we're taking that copybook file, it's the definition. We're applying that transformation, and we're outputting a JSON event. So it was the original event, but now in JSON format in a cloud event. And we're going to stick it onto SQS or possibly Event Bridge, or both at the same time, right? So we can actually split it out. And so that way now it's like, when you tell your developers, hey, go to this SQS queue in AWS, there's a JSON event waiting for you. We need you to pull that off and do something with it. They know exactly what to do with that. So we're modernizing it without taking out the legacy infrastructure, even though sometimes you want to, maybe with a baseball bat, but we're taking that legacy infrastructure and we're making so your developers can do something with it, right? So that's kind of the flow of what this looks like. But what we're going to show today is we're going to kind of highlight, we're going to simplify it down, because really what we're focusing on is the transformation piece, that inside the middle there. So what I'm going to show you is a few different transformations. So we're going to be changing out this centerpiece here where it says transformation. So what I have set up here, I actually have a Kong API gateway set up. So it is running a custom plugin that we wrote that's open source, that is a cloud event plugin. So when I send a curl request to Kong API gateway, and we'll show you what this curl request look like with the payload, it's going to take that payload, it's going to create a cloud event. Again, the cloud event really is, and I'll show you what that looks like. It really is just the data with some attributes on it and in a certain specification. So Kong API Gateway is going to receive the curl request, going to create that cloud event. It's going to come into the TriggerMesh, API, and we're going to do a transformation. We're going to show a couple different transformation pieces. And then we're going to, our target, instead of being like SQS or another queue, which is what you would normally do, we have an event viewer. So we're going to see the output event, right? So this is more for like debugging purposes, just to see what the event looks like after we're done with it. So we're going to see what the curl request looks like, and we're going to see what the output looks like. And we're going to keep changing out that transformation to show you what the different transformations are that TriggerMesh can do, just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that you can do with TriggerMesh, right? So let's jump in. I'm going to bring up my screen here. And so here we have a lot going on the screen, but we're going to kind of go through those pieces again. So on the upper right side here, this is my code. So these are my YAML files that I'm showing. So this is actually where we're going to be doing the transformations. This is what a TriggerMesh transformation looks like. So we're going to be doing that. In the bottom right, I have my terminal. And then on the left side here, we have what we call TM debugger. So this is going to show the output of those cloud events, right? So we're just going to view those cloud events. Now, again, this could be S2S, this could be Kafka, this could be, S3 buckets. This could be whatever it is you want to send it to. In this case, we're going to send it to our UI here just to look at them. So this first transformation we're looking at is XML to JSON transformation. So this is the kind. So you can see here's my API definitions of what we're doing. So this is going to just accept input of XML. It's not really going to do much with it except turn it into JSON, right? So this is a very simple example just to give you a sense of what exactly a transformation is doing and how it looks. You can see here's the name demo. So this is just the name of my transformation. And then here is where the target is going to be. So that's what sync means in these definitions, is where are we sending it to? Again, this can be changed to be SQS or whatever it is. Instead, in this case, it's just a service we call TM debugger. It's just, that's what you're seeing on the left side here. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually come in here and we're going to send in my curl request. So let's take a look at this curl request. This is, we're sending it to our Kong. We have a Kong set up here, port 8000 with a route, and we're sending it XML. That's what this application XML. And here is the payload. It's just an XML document, nothing crazy about it. And so if I go ahead and send it, it's going to send it to Kong. Kong's going to create the cloud event. It's going to send it into my transformation, and then it's going to output to my TM debugger. And you can see here, we have a couple of listeners on our TM debugger, so you can ignore the fact that it's multiple. So here's the JSON data. So this is what the data looks like. You can see on the data field here. So this is that same XML, but now in JSON format. And then you can see there's a couple different fields over here. So there's an ID that we create, the source, which was curl, right? The time, and then here's the type. I'm going to just mention the type and the ID because in more complex data flows, the type and the ID can really matter, or the source can too as well, or the time. So you can use these fields to filter things. So you could say, hey, if it's coming in and it has this certain type, then do something with it. If it's got another type, do something else with it, right? So you can do that kind of splitting based on that field. You can also use that ID to potentially say, hey, we need to correlate when we send it on in the flow, and maybe it's going to come back as a response. We need to correlate with the ID so that we can tell the API that requested it, the requester, hey, here's your response. So the ID matters and the type matters. In our case, it doesn't, but it can matter as a part of the data flow. But this is what a cloud event looks like. So this is a specification again. That's just, the cloud event specification by CNCF. So that was our very simple example of sending XML to JSON, right? So the next step up from that is we're going to do what's called a JQ transformation. So here's JQ transformation. It's a little bit more complex, right? We have the kind is JQ transformation. So that's defining what it is. Again, we name it here. And then here is the actual query. So if you're familiar with JQ, it's a Linux command. Basically, it's doing a query of JSON, right? So it's pulling out specific pieces of a JSON object and just saying, hey, what was that field? So you may have used this command before. And so what we're doing is basically running a command as our transformation and then outputting it, right? So here's the actual query. We're saying, hey, give me just the account number value out of the JSON you send me. And again, the sync here is just going to TM debugger. So that's not changed. We're just going to output it here. So I'm going to clear my events over here. Here is what we're going to send in. So this is the JSON you can see here where it has 3 fields. So it has deposit, it has account number, and has transaction date. And what we'll see is when we send this in, we're going to send this to Kong. It's going to create the cloud event, and it's going to just output the data that it outputs is just the account number. Also, a little side event here. If bonus points for anyone who can tell me what 6031769 is, hint, it's a old cheat code from Grand Theft Auto game. That's one of the numbers that I'll remember for the rest of my life. So what we're doing here is we're pulling out just the account number. Now, what I'm going to show you here is how we can modify this API to pull out something differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, you know what, instead of getting the account number, I want to get the deposit amount. So let's go back over to JQ, and instead of account number, we're going to edit this and we're going to say deposit. So let me just make this a little bit, actually we can pull it back over here. So now we're saying query deposit. So I'm going to save this. And what I'm going to do is you can see down at the bottom here, I can do kubectl. So if you're familiar with Kubernetes, basically we're doing a kubectl is what a lot of people call it, kubectl command. And we're going to apply -f, and we're going to apply that JQ YAML. So that's what we just saved, and we're going to apply it. And it's basically going to say, okay, what was the name of that component? Oh, JQ foo extraction. Cool. We got this, and it configured, meaning there was a change and you just applied it. We updated the existing component to use the new file. Now watch what happens if I apply this again. I'm just going to apply it again real quick. You'll see it says unchanged. That means, hey, there was no changes. So you can basically keep reapplying these multiple times, which is helpful to know. If it's a part of your CI/CD pipeline, you can just have it, apply, whatever gets pushed to your master branch, something like that, or your main branch. And so this is really easy to just kind of apply multiple times and make sure it works. So we changed this now to be deposit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to grab the same exact curl command, send it to the same exact API. And now what's going to happen is you can see instead of the account number, it got the deposit amount. So it was that easy to update my definition of my component, my transformation, apply it, run it. Kong was still there, team debugger was still there. I just changed out the centralized piece, and it sent the whole thing, and away we went. So it's that easy to make that kind of update. Cool. The third example we're going to show is a little more complicated. So we did an XML to JSON, we did a JQ transformation. Now we're going to do an XSLT transformation. So what this is doing, just to make this a little bit bigger, this is an XSLT style sheet. If you're not familiar with it, you don't need to know details. Basically what this is doing is saying input XML, here's a style sheet. So we're going to basically format the XML in whatever the style sheet says to do. And we're going to output XML again. So that's all the style sheet is doing. So this particular example, the key parts here are in here where it says first name and last name. So what it's doing is it's actually going to take a bunch of pieces of data and it's going to sort them by first name. And then the secondary sort is by last name. So generally it's going to be first name first, and it only goes to last name if there are matching first names, right? So we'll send this in here. Again, the kind is XSLT transformation. The sync here is team debugger. So nothing's really changed there. It's just we're now passing in an XSLT value. One comment I want to make here is we have this inline. This can be stored in a Kubernetes secret. This can be stored in a file. I'm doing it inline just for ease of showing what it's doing, but it doesn't have to necessarily be inline in the file. So we're gonna go ahead and send in some XML. So here at the top here, you can see this is a giant thing of XML. So we're going to just go ahead and send this in. So what this is passing in is just a couple first names and a couple last names. I'm going to go ahead and send it in. And once it goes through Kong and creates the cloud event and passes it along, you can see here's where it's sorting by first name. So it's Darth is first, and then Han, and then Luke. So that's their current sorting. Again, I can update this. So let's change the sort order. So instead of first name, last name, I'm going to change this. So we're going to sort by last name first and then sort by first name. We're going to do a kubectl apply. And again, it's going to say configured. So XSLT configured. Great. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to send that same thing in. And we'll see, originally it was Darth, Han, Luke, and now it's Darth, Han, Luke. Did I not save it? I don't think I saved it. There we go. I didn't save it at first. It helps if you save before you apply. So here we go. So now we have Luke, Han, Darth, right? So because it's going Skywalker, Solo, Vader. So it's that easy. Again, this really all this is saying is you can make changes to it and apply it, and you don't have to know crazy configuration code. It's just look, edit this file, and away you go. All right. So we've seen XML to JSON, we've seen JQ, we've seen XSLT. This fourth one here, what we're going to show here is called DataWeave. So this is, if you're familiar with MuleSoft, they have their own scripting language. It's called DataWeave. It is not necessarily like Python, but it's fairly readable if you're familiar with other scripting languages. But they call them spells. So it's DataWeave spells is the name of their scripts. So let's take a look at this transformation. This is saying DataWeave transformation. So that's the type. Here is the spell. So here's the definition of the spell. And then in here, we also have to say what the input is, which is XML, and the output is JSON. So again, in this case, we're actually doing the XML to JSON in the spell. So it's actually inputting that and then outputting JSON. But you can do opposite. You can do JSON to JSON. There's a lot of options. This is an example just from the MuleSoft website of what one of the spells looks like. And again, the sync here is TM debugger. So what this is going to do is we're going to send it a whole bunch of data in XML format, and it's going to grab, you can see here, it says payload, order, buyer, address. So it's going to grab some of the pieces from the payload, specifically the order section of the payload, specifically the buyer section of the order, is going to grab those pieces and drop everything else. So that's all the spell does, is it takes a whole bunch of data and it grabs just the pieces you want and passes it along. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this is going to look like. So here's what I'm sending in. Again, I know it's a lot of XML, but the short version is we're basically taking all of this XML and we're going to grab just a couple of pieces out of it. So I'm going to clear this event. So let's go ahead and send this in. And you can see here, the output is JSON. It is just grabbing those fields that we asked for. And it was that quick to then say, okay, you have your DataWeave script. So, I don't think anyone's going to sit down and write DataWeave if they are not already familiar with MuleSoft. But if this is the kind of thing where you have some MuleSoft scripts written and you need to run them somewhere, that's not a MuleSoft. Basically, what you can do is you can take those scripts, drop them into place here, and TriggerMesh can run those scripts so you don't have to rewrite them. Now you can rewrite them, and then we can work with you to run any other code you want. So it could be a Spring Boot application, it could be a Python script, it could be anything else. But these DataWeave spells are cool just from if you already have DataWeave, we can run those as a transformation. So that's kind of what we were focusing on today, is that transformation piece. Really appreciate everyone coming out and taking a look at what we got. Some future tech talks, we're planning on doing one around Salesforce. So this time we did a bunch of transformations with the source and the target being the same. What we're going to look at next time is, hey, if you have Salesforce, if you want to read in from Salesforce, we'll show you how you can kind of manipulate that data. Or if you want to send updates to Salesforce, you can also do that. So we're going to work with Salesforce as both the source and the target. And we'll work on some future tech talks to talk about some other transformations you can do, maybe some longer pipelines going from that IBM MQ to SQS. We'll show you what that looks like. But feel free to follow me and send me an email. We also have my LinkedIn there and some links there. The other thing, if you want to chat with some of our engineers or some of our folks who work in our community, if you go to triggermesh.com, up in the top, there's a little Slack icon. You can join our community there and join us and ask questions or just kind of chat about TriggerMesh. We'd be happy to have you in chat. So thanks a lot for coming out today. Really appreciate it. And let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.